my life is pretty stacked and hectic, but I find, you can do a lot in like smaller increments of like 5-10 minutes just on the side that can really greatly benefit someone's life.
Welcome to the Long Game Podcast. My name's George Bafaloukos. In this podcast, we'll be taking a deep dive into the world of game audio. Join us as we explore the careers, challenges, and triumphs of the professionals who craft the sounds that bring our favorite games to life. Today's guest is Ryan Sim. He's currently the technical audio supervisor at Warner Brothers, but is a veteran of the video games industry with over 14 years of experience. In this episode, we talk about his beginnings as a session guitarist, internships early in his career, remote versus in-house work, mentorship, and managing teams for outsourced audio. Let's dig in. Well, we're back with another episode of The Long Game, and today we're joined by Ryan Sim. How's it going, Ryan?
I'm good. How you doing?
Yeah, doing well. Can't complain at all. It's really nice to catch up with you again. It's been a while. But yeah, usually just start this podcast off with an introduction about you, just from the very beginning, what got you interested in music and sound, where you went to school, how you got your start in the industry, and then we'll just kind of take it from there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's going to be quite some history.
It's a big question, I know, but yeah, it's worth it.
Nah, that's cool. I mean, I initially started off as a musician. I was a session guitarist. That was my first foray into the audio side of life. I was studying it at a university in Guildford, UK, called the Academy of Contemporary Music. And I kind of climbed through doing like a diploma, higher diploma, and I started a degree in like guitar performance, essentially. So while also working as a session guitarist, doing kind of wedding bands and recording session work on the side. I sort of started the first day and decided I didn't enjoy it anymore because we had to learn jazz scales. And I felt like a lot of the kind of the creative fun and the actual playing of the guitar was going away. So it sort of led me to do some soul searching on the side. I ended up speaking to a bunch of my kind of gaming community friends at the time, and one of them is Simon Brewer, who worked at Rebellion at the time. And he suggested, why didn't you look at game audio? I was like, this was probably 15, 16 years ago. So it wasn't really known as a career. It was still quite a new thing unless you'd already been in it. It was quite new. So I was like, okay, yeah, I love, my whole life is games. This could be really nice. So I started looking around, and my university had just started a creative sound design course. So I was like, maybe I can transition to that. And I was one of 8 people to try out the course, which was really cool. I knew nothing. Like, I didn't know what Foley was. I'd never heard of it. Didn't know anything about microphone positions. But because it was interesting, I learned as much as I could in my own free time. So I'd go home and be like, I learned this word today. What is it? Or what is the XY microphone position? And why would you use it? So I spent a lot of my kind of time self-learning on the outside, which is very helpful. I think by the time I got close to finishing the first year, I was already working within the sort of games industry or games adjacent on animations, just that I volunteered in my free time for Source Filmmaker to help build a little portfolio that was like still tied to games, which is what I loved. That's kind of the start, to be honest. That was the very foundation of where I started, was just a single friend being like, yo, this is a career you can do. And it is indeed a career I can do.
I mean, yeah, that's amazing. Like, there's a lot to unpack there to begin with. Were you in bands in high school? Like, when did you start playing guitar, if you were already gigging consistently before you even started college?
Yeah, so, I mean, I've been playing guitar since I was, I think, 7 or something, kind of as much as you do when you're a kid. But I got very into it, and I think it became like my identity, my thing. My family were very supportive. I had a big Line 6 virtual cab by 4x4 kind of monstrosity in my bedroom, which was like, I couldn't even turn it past 1, but it was the coolest thing ever, So yeah, I kind of got into some hobby bands, and then as we kind of grew up a little bit, it kind of was like, wedding bands in the UK, you can get, for a beginner, kind of starting out £200 each for a wedding, and all of the songs are the same. You learn the same 30 songs because everyone tends to want the same music for a wedding. And then it went into performing on a couple little albums, which was really cool, of just like local people around Guildford, and being in ACM, like the university had like Ed Sheeran went to that school as well, and I passed him in like music business, but he never really turned up because he was always gigging on the side. And we had like Spice Girls and stuff, so there was a lot of like past alumni that would still search for people just to help out on any local recordings going on, or like the labels would use us as a reference. So I got quite lucky on the recording side for guitar, which was nice, especially as like someone amateur, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, I have a similar story, but I never made a nickel playing music. Like, it was always in like heavy metal bands. We were promoting ourselves, selling our own tickets, spending money on our own studio recordings. I mean, I probably lost a decent amount of money playing in those bands. So, that's really refreshing to hear.
Yeah, it's just a lot of fun, to be honest. It's that kind of it's a mentality I didn't like at the start, but now a lot of the roles I've been in recently have ended up being a lot more about self-promotion again, or promoting a company instead of a band. So it's something I'm now quite comfortable with, but I did hate the whole promotion side of it in the kind of early days when you're starting up.
Yeah, so did I. Just kind of made it feel like a job when it was really just fun to like play music with your friends and get it tight enough to go play a show somewhere. So I definitely know what you mean. But that's awesome. Yeah, so really interesting upbringing. So yeah, you just started school and immediately just realized that this session stuff isn't for me. But at the same time, you just happened to have a friend at Rebellion. Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, so like we were just part of a gaming community that called Special Attack at the time, because of course it was, and we would play Team Fortress together. So that was really fun. Like, I used to be really into the competitive Team Fortress scene, and through him I ended up learning that they were eventually looking for an audio intern, and his brother Nick Brewer was the audio director of Rebellion. So like, it didn't help me get the job knowing him, but it helped me know that there was a role popping up at the time, because I don't think it was the most advertised back in the early days, where you look on job boards and some places only posted them on their website instead. So yeah, I did a little mini kind of sound design reel for them from the animations I'd been working on just in my spare time within Source Filmmaker, and threw together a little Wise show reel, because of course that's kind of 13 years ago, that was the thing that you did back when like School of Video Game Audio was like starting to build up the courses and things like that, and got lucky enough to land the role after like 2 or 3 interviews with them. So yeah, that was really nice. So I got to work on Sniper Elite 3, which was really awesome. A really good kind of freedom as well with that role. They let me be involved in everything from dialogue editing and recording to making UI sound effects to doing the bullet cam sound effects and the implementation. So it was a really good like actual intern focused internship where you get to learn and you're not just filling a spot for the sake of it. They pushed to learn really well alongside Graham Gaverill, who was the senior sound designer there at the time as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing, because I know that a lot of internships, I know you just kind of do, I mean, I hate to say it, but like the grunt work, you may just be going through organizing recordings from a VO script or tagging metadata. So like, it's amazing that you were able to be that hands-on in your first job.
Yeah, so I really sort of solidified that I think I'd made the choice that worked best for me. That's what I enjoy. And then after finishing that, it was only a 2-3 months smaller internship. I eventually managed to somehow land at Jagex for an internship as well, just purely through timing and applying. But it was one of those roles of, I moved to Oxford to do the Rebellion internship, and I moved to Cambridge for 4 months just to be able to do the Jagex internship as well. So it was a lot of relocating my life, which I'd not had to do much before until then. So that was kind of the necessity, or the back in that time at least, it was a lot more of a common thing because remote wasn't that big.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's unfortunate, but I see a lot of that coming back these days as well. I know EA is doing a big push to go back to in-house only. And I mean, they've only got a handful of studios and none of them are nearby me. So yeah, I mean, I understand a lot of these kids coming up at least need to have an open mind about relocating, which wasn't really the case when I was breaking in. You know, it was kind of during the pandemic and studios were embracing remote work because they had to. So, you know, that kind of opened people's eyes that like, you know, this can be done. We can still make great games, but you don't need to move across the country or move to another country. But I feel like that's kind of making its way back around now that the dust has settled a little bit, you know?
Yeah, it's a really difficult one because I get both sides. I like the remote life. Obviously, I've been remote for ages and it works amazingly for my life and most of the team's life at Warner. So, you know, I'm glad we have that option of flexibility. But I think also for like interns and stuff, you do also gain a bit just from being present in a environment where everyone else is present. Like not much, but there is, I think, a small bit more information that you'll learn and pick up because you'll be there for the kind of idle coffee conversations unless your company remotely has a way to facilitate that itself, which does happen. But yeah, it's a difficult balance. I think, you know, in office for the right reasons makes sense, but in office for the sake of management, wanting people in office to just be in meetings all day with people that are in a different country because you're a co-dev or something working with everyone isn't very useful.
I mean, yeah, I tend to agree. And I may have been a little harsh coming from that because WayForward really embraced remote work during the pandemic. So, you know, they still have an office, but they just downsized it. So like the people nearby and the people that enjoy working there, they still go. But, you know, we've got a programmer in Japan. We've got a couple people in England. We've got people all over the place and it works really well. But especially about what you said about being an intern. I mean, yeah, you could definitely gain something that you may not get just talking in Slack or on Teams if you were in office, especially earlier in your career. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. It's something, but it is a tough balance. I think, yeah, like just being remote allows you access to more people that also wouldn't have had the opportunity. So, you know, whether that is through just the logistics of finances that they can't move because we don't know everyone's background, or it gives people in maybe different countries the chance to work with you if that's something people are open to. And, you know, the game audio community is super vast. It's always amazing. And I find that like we tend to know people in like every country, and you're friends with everyone. It doesn't matter where you're from. It's like the best industry by far, just for people to be nice, to be kind to each other and to look out for each other. Even people applying for like the same roles you might be. You're like, oh, you got that job instead of me. I'm so happy for you. That's like so amazing, you know, and you don't get that in like the music industry, for instance. Well, that's another thing I disliked about the session life is everyone views you as competition and would probably go out of their way to like hinder someone's reputation as opposed to boosting them up like we do here.
Yeah. I mean, it's very uncommon. I've never seen a community quite like the game audio community, and it still just continues to amaze me how kind everybody is and how generous everybody is. And yeah, like you said, just celebrating each other, celebrating the wins, and then trying to help people who are still trying to break in and help them along. I've never really seen like a truly professional industry with that same attitude, you know. I mean, it really is. So it is amazing.
It is. It also makes it easier to learn more about people and see who's putting in the effort as well, because everyone praises it. So, you know, it can be a lot more public, or information access it's just a lot more common. That's how I met, like, you know, Alexander, who works with us now. He came to me just for CV advice ages ago, or 2 years ago. And I thought his CV was great and his reel was awesome. And I remembered it. And then I saw he was actively trying over the years and people would share his work still. And it's like constant little reminders of, oh, yeah, this person's still trying. So, you know, we ended up in a position where we needed someone and I could take on a junior, which was something I got to push for. And that was really awesome. And he was like an immediate, yeah, this guy would be great. You know, I don't think you can get that in many other industries. So it's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I usually keep a handful of notes ahead of these interviews, and we kind of touched on a couple of them just in that brief conversation there. I mean, one thing that I wanted to ask is we don't see too many internships offered these days. And obviously, the two that you had were pretty important in starting your career. But now that you're in leadership, and I mean, you already sort of answered this, so maybe you could just go a little bit deeper into like the industry-wide kind of approach to this. But do you see a realistic way for more of these junior and entry-level opportunities, or do you not? And there's no wrong answer. Like, I can definitely understand both sides, but it's just interesting to see how the industry has changed from where you started and like where we're at now.
Yeah, I mean, I find the industry is kind of ever evolving. So even when I was looking for internships, the common saying was, oh yeah, you can start in QA and then work your way to different roles. And that isn't really a thing anymore. You kind of, if you go to QA, you stay in QA forever. You might be audio QA, but it's very rare as a stepping stone into the role that you actually want now. Then it kind of changed to internships being a lot more common. And that's kind of where I got very lucky. And now I think there's there's kind of like a weird risk aversion where people want to keep teams quite tight and short, or small, sorry, not short. So it becomes a lot more senior stacked instead. So most roles that I see going now tend to be like mid-level to senior, because that's a much safer bet than investing in someone without people maybe to oversee them as well in a more experienced position. But I also think we have the most access to information to help build skill sets that didn't exist when I was starting up. Like every game engine or middleware has their own tutorials and information publicly available that you can start doing your own work too. It's a lot easier now to get Unreal, check through their demo levels, add in your own sound. Back when I started, it was like check on all of the websites and hope someone has maybe made a cool level and ask them if you can get a copy of it to put your own sound on. So I think in that aspect, it's, we have a lot more information available for people, but I do hope to see a rise in kind of more junior roles appearing again. It's something I've noticed becoming a lot more prevalent with audio vendors or outsourcers, that they now have such a large team that they can start hiring juniors because you can oversee them and look after them and actually facilitate their growth. But I don't really see it happening too much at the moment in like indie scenes or like AAA or many AAA studios, but I think it needs to.
I think that totally makes sense. Like the audio vendor thing. Sweet Justice just put out a junior role, and that was the first I'd seen in a while. And I mean, I do respect the fact that they're willing to take on that work, because I can't imagine how many applications they got for that role. Because at a certain point, I know the industry is saturated, but I know there's a lot of talented young people that could really provide a lot of value. And yeah, I just hope that this kind of scene that we're in at the very moment with all the layoffs and everything will start to level off, because we are going to find ourselves in a very senior stacked industry.
Yeah, the risk as well with people being seniors, like and being that stacked, is you get a much more severe loss of knowledge when people move on. People are now staying at companies as long as they can, just because the industry is a bit funky at times. And there's no one to hand over that skill or knowledge or to bring in new ideas, because like I learn by everyone else, like I'm always looking for ways to get better and bringing in new perspectives or new ideas, or someone just who is questioning, why do we do it like this? Because some things in-game audio I've noticed people do on autopilot. Oh yeah, we set up WIs like this. Why? Because it's just the way it is. And then so it's a good way to break those habits, especially for experienced people, and it can help everyone get better. I find a lot of like more junior sound designers are really good with the kind of the modern style sound design, where everything's kind of like high mids and punchy, or like very kind of everything's a transient style. And, that's the way a lot of games are going. I'm not saying every game needs to, but, it's a good way of bringing those skill sets to the team and, just allowing that kind of flexibility for a team, because we do need to be training more people just to keep the industry going, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I'm kind of bouncing around. I love how I have a sheet of notes, but I like to see where the conversation flows, but we just keep touching on things that I meant to talk to you about in the first place.
Yeah, I realized we skipped half of the job stuff.
Yeah, that's okay. We'll get there. But that is sort of a natural segue into your mentorship. You do a lot of mentorship for efforts like Into Games and Game Academy. And I've been trying to sort of do some mentorship myself. It just sort of happened upon me. I went to GDC and there's this kid that was fresh out of VFS, Josh, and we had planned to meet up there. And I just kind of got too busy. But I messaged him on LinkedIn when I got back to my hotel and apologized and was just like, hey, send me your website. And I watched his demo reel and I was just like, wow, like this is amazing. So I've just been kind of staying in touch, and he'll send me some redesigns and audio tests he's doing, and I'll just try and give him feedback. And I'm just wondering, first of all, how do you have the time to do all of that on top of your workload? And I guess you already sort of answered, but like, what does that kind of provide you being in a leadership role?
Yeah, I mean, on the time side, I don't know. My life is pretty stacked and hectic, but I find, you can do a lot in like smaller increments of like 5-10 minutes just on the side that can really greatly benefit someone's life. And I find that just really nice. I don't really do it for any reason than beyond I think it's nice to help others. I was obviously helped when I got started just by being pointed to game audio. Like every time I get a role, I still thank Simon just for putting me on the kind of the right track in the first place, and it is just a good way of being able to help people get into the industry. Or I think half of the mentees are now like seniors, which is terrifying. And like, even like some I work with, which is really cool, like Aaron, a Motraverse, he's someone that I met because he wanted to get better at tech audio, and he just didn't know options, or ways he could improve his skill sets. He was working on a little project called Bang on Balls, I think, very amazingly named. But, he gave me kind of a rundown, and I gave him, just ideas of ways he can make things more technical with the limitations he had. Like, oh, if you've got an ambient system, this is really cool, but maybe you could make a bird call and response system so that birds don't overlap each other if they're speaking, and it's very simple. It's kind of a case of send an event, listen out for it, make sure that the other one plays something relevant and pace it out very nicely. But it's kind of like finding granular and incremental steps to help people get better. A very common thing I find in a lot of junior reels is really nice focus on sound design for the key moments, like a combat scene, the weapons or the punches will sound great, but there's always a silence or a lack of attention to things like ambience or reverb or worldization to like make everything else sit in or feel nicely. And that's something I always kind of, highlight in people's work as well, just like things that they are missing, because they might be doing really great, but it's one of those, until someone points it out to you, you never know that it is even a thing that you need to worry about. And sometimes just a little course correction can go a really massive way, which is, just a lot of fun. I find you also have to, like, with mentorship, you really have to work with the people and figure out their personality. There's like a lot of soft skills that goes into learning how people are receptive to feedback in general. Even when I was like, everywhere I've been, I tend to kick off one-to-ones and mentorship, no matter the level of people. So I find, you get to have a really big variety of, some people are visual learners, and for audio, that tends to also look like, hey, this sound is really cool. You can clean it up by using EQ and taking out these frequencies, or, have it dynamic in this way, and this is the exact plugin and EQ setting I am using, so you can know exactly what I've done. Because if I just described it to them, that doesn't paint them the picture, That's kind of one of the big things that you will learn, is just how people are receptive. Some other people, just a description and letting them explore and try out different things is how they learn, because then they try a lot of different things and experiment, and they end up learning multiple different ways to approach the same thing. So it's all about learning how people learn. And I think it's a soft skill you can only get over time by repeatedly putting yourself in those shoes and having to learn it. I remember when I was learning guitar years ago, learning all my scales, or like the cycle of fifths, and we got to modes, and I didn't understand it at all. And I had a single teacher come in that was a guest lecturer, and he goes, well, it's just taking a scale, starting it from a different root note, but it's the same scale and it sounds different. And that was all it took for me to be like, oh yeah, this makes sense. So the C major scale, if you start it the same scale but from a D, it's a different mode. Cool. Now all of this makes sense in one sentence that took me probably like 3 months of struggling. So yeah, it's just really a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely. I find it really fun. Like, I'm just now starting, but I definitely understand what you're saying. It's not really something that can be taught. It's something that you kind of just learn by doing, and like actually going through the process of being a mentor to somebody. But the fact that you do that with everything else that's going on in your life is really admirable. And I really appreciate when people who are like established and deep into their careers take the time to share that knowledge. So yeah, I give you a lot of credit for that. So going from there, I guess going off on that tangent, what would maybe be like a handful of tips for somebody that is just breaking in 2025 in this climate that we're in?
Oof, that's difficult. I think nowadays you need to be really good at marketing yourself. There's kind of a level of confidence you need to imply that you have on applications, and a lot of the times it's within the wording. So I help a lot of people with the CVs, and they have all of the right words and the context, but the ways that they state it or the ways it comes across, it's they sound a bit soft, like you're unsure, like has applied some experience of WYs. You're like, cool. So you could say skilled usage of Ys. Obviously that's a bit cheesy in this example, but a lot of the times, it's how you phrase the skill sets. I do the same with mock interviews with people. A lot of the times they have all the abilities and they might be really experienced, but they're just, I'd say, like, if you can't sum it in a bullet point for someone who doesn't really know what your role is, it's probably not as strong as it could be with those types of sort of statements. That applies to both interviews and just on a CV. I think nowadays, CV-wise, or showreel wise, we are at a really good point where you do want to be able to show you have hands-on game experience, whether that's your own, taking the Unreal demos I mentioned earlier, or a Unity demo, or any of the Wise demos that they've got available, and making a theoretical project. Like, I always want to work on a skateboard project, so here is a real quick breakdown of how I would design the sound of skating across different surfaces. You can always tailor it to show your own personality, which I really enjoy. I think that makes people stand out very well. We're also now getting to a point where a lot of companies specifically look for people with experience or investment, like time investment, into their software or the software that they rely on. A good example is, I think, like Epic Games. If you had the same people, but one person only had Unity experience and some person had the same years of experience but in Unreal, they'd probably pick the Unreal person. And like Sony and all the other big companies will be like that, with WYs or Fmod for kind of smaller titles. So, sometimes it is a case of picking and choosing the goal companies that you have and building yourself up towards the roles that you want with those skill sets.
Yeah. I mean, that makes total sense to me. You mentioned the skateboarding thing, and this always comes to mind. Aaron Sendin did this really awesome tech demo years ago. I'm not sure if it was like for his first job or what the scenario was, but it was a linear video of some skate footage that he basically created an entire system in Wise around. Like, say it was playing in like a GameStop or somewhere where that video would loop over and over. It would never play the same way. I don't know. I just always thought that was really cool, and that one always stuck with me.
Yeah, that's what I mean, is like, it is memorable when you get to do you don't have to be limited by it being a real game project. You can just I've always wanted to work on a tank. Here's the tank system of how I would set up the different parts of it, and it shows that you have a nice understanding, at least, of how you would approach things, especially for like a junior level. I think that's more than enough, because you're supposed to be learning on that role anyway.
Totally. Yeah, yeah. I think that's great advice. And I think anybody that's in that position right now would get a lot from heeding it. So I guess with like the last half hour-ish we've got, we can go wherever we want from there. I want to talk about this Warner Brothers job. You recently became the technical audio supervisor. And I'm just curious how that job came about, you being in the UK and then the job being in the States. So yeah, if you could just kind of elaborate on that a little bit.
Honestly, very random. I was at Wabi Sabi Sound as an audio director for a while, looking after a lot of that team, working on Diablo as well, which was really amazing. But they ended up closing down after we had a project finish and a game we were working on get cancelled. So luckily, Andrew Lackey moved on to Epic Games, which was really awesome. I think he's in the best role for him, which is cool. But one of his parting notes with Wabi is he passed my name along to Brian Watkins, as they're kind of old friends from working on The Matrix together or something. Like, it was kind of like back in the film days of his career. And I don't know what he said. It must have been something nice, but I got a call from Brian, or an email from Brian wanting to schedule a call. And as soon as I started, he's like, right, so you can start next week. And there was no, we hadn't had a discussion at all. It was just a straight up offer, and pretty much went from there. Since sort of joining, I think Brian's left me to handle basically anything hands-on tech audio. So anything in-game, I just look after basically. And then anything more like linear cinematic wise or field recording, that's his specialty. And we're quite a good little duo, which is really fun. It's I think it's just a really awesome team, a really awesome place to be, with a scary, powerful reputation. So yeah, it's still very surreal. It doesn't quite feel like I've been there as long as I have, and it still doesn't even feel like I'm here at times.
I'm sure. I mean, that's amazing. So it really was just a case of recommendation. You want the job, you got the job.
Yeah, basically. I mean, I think just it's the kind of management and direction experience that I've had of just managing outsourcers or vendors has really helped on this side, because the Warner Game Audio department is a vendor. So we work across lots of really awesome projects, everything from Foley, VO to like tech audio and sound design. So it's a lot to manage, and I'm used to juggling so many things at once. It's kind of what I enjoy the most. It's never being bored on a same project, siloed for 5 years at a time or something.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess we could dig into that a bit more. So there was Wabi Sabi was an outsourcer. You worked for Team Audio, which was also an outsourcer. Is there any others that I'm forgetting?
I mean, I was with Pit Stop Productions for a while, very early in my career. They're also a vendor, but they were much more of I worked just internally at Sumo Digital and eventually just joined Sumo Digital. But yeah, so it was mostly Team Audio, where I got to help, direct my own project. It's where I met a lot of really amazing people. I kicked off the one-to-ones to help everyone, but also just to have excuses to meet everyone and, help everyone as a team grow, just because, I know Alex was on this fairly recently as well, Alex Hastings, and he's just he's the best. He's one of my favorites, he's awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah, I got to know him very early, before I really had any experience, just kind of met on Twitter. But yeah, he's been a really good friend for a long time. So that was really cool to see you guys work together. But yeah, I guess that being said, and I mean, this is kind of just a broad question, but what are the biggest challenges when you're managing a team when it is like a outsourced situation?
The hardest part is the initial setup of finding the way that you want to work as a company. So I only really like projects and look for projects where we can be fully integrated. There is no barriers of, we're just going to tell you what to do, and you don't really get to question much. You just do it. That's kind of it feels like almost like being a musician again, almost a bit more, not inhumane, but it's less personable. I think you get the best value out of people when they essentially consider themselves a part of whatever team you're integrated with. You want them to be part of the project's identity. And that's kind of the hardest part, is finding that fit and letting people know that this is also what you're after as a company. Like, you don't just hire us, tell us what to do, and that's it. It's you hire us at Team Audio or Wabi or Warner, and we are your team alongside. If you have a department, we'll contribute in the same way that they do, go to the same scrums that they do. It's just it's really cool. But the difficulty as well is I think when you're a vendor, there is always a perception of quality that you need to expect, or like you need to kind of deliver on. And that is, obviously we always want to deliver the best work, but at the same time, a lot of game audio is about trying things and getting them wrong. And sometimes things might need a bit more revision. And you kind of have to be careful how that is perceived at times, because if you're doing work, they're paying you for it, and it's going to get thrown away just because it doesn't work. That might be seen as a wasted investment, versus like if you were in-house and that happens, it tends to be, oh yeah, that's just normal. So you've always kind of got to focus on making sure you're at least delivering something that you can prove shippable, or that you can get production to sign off that, yep, these, I'm happy with the output. And that's kind of that's the interesting part, So there are like certain expectations, I think, that are higher when you're an outsourcer, because while everyone is essentially permanent on the projects that we bring people into, there is always a risk, and you never really know. So you just need to make sure that you're doing the best that you can, keeping quality consistent. And that's one of the things that, like, I do my role working on the projects, but then I also get to look out for everyone and make sure that they have the support that they need, or they're delivering things, or maybe revising things before they go client facing, just to make sure that they are as presentable as can be in a way that doesn't interrupt timelines and things like that. So it is a challenge, because it becomes a lot more about maybe biz dev or perception as well as what you deliver. So it's cool, but everyone's amazing. So it's been a lot of fun working with everyone.
No, that's true. And I hadn't really consciously thought of that. The previous company that I worked for, Chapter 4, was a vendor. I feel like I was sort of subconsciously aware that everything that I was delivering was pretty much client-facing beyond the initial feedback that I would get from my audio director. And it's not so much that way working in-house. And I never even really clocked that. So that's a really good point, because where I'm at now, there's always sort of like a temp phase. We're mainly just focusing on getting the hooks implemented. Like, it should never sound bad. Like, we're not trying to annoy everybody that's playing the build, but it doesn't necessarily need to be like shippable quality at that stage. Like, let's make sure the hooks are working the way that we intended first, and then we'll do another pass and polish the actual design that will end up shipping.
I mean, that's a good way of doing it. Yeah, like we do, like I try, and depending on the project, there is that like level of quality system of, like L0, L1, L2, and L3. Or every company has different ways of doing it, but one's just like, you're aware of it. One's it triggers. It might not be full functionality. Like if it's a gun, it just might be a single WAV that fires as opposed to every layer. And then the next one's, we've got the tails working for different indoors and outdoors, and it can stack with milestones that way. But yeah, I think there's just like an invisible pressure that there is always an expectation of something when you're a vendor. It depends on where you are in a project as well, because usually for a lot of vendors, you get brought in to finish a project because they realize they need more manpower. So then you're also like, cool, so I also need to make sure that I'm now delivering to what the team has maybe spent 2 or 3 years perfecting or designing their chops to. We've now just come in and have to match that quality.
You have to learn that language. You have to learn all the systems that they've been building all that time in a short amount of time. And yeah, just like immediately be cohesive.
Yeah, I think, that's the kind of the hidden side of vendors. Like it's, I think it's becoming a bit more of a safe role, or, I find a lot of audio vendors have been growing more than in-house roles in a way. And it's been really awesome, like seeing crews grow with loads of friends all over the place. You've got like Sweet Justice and even like Crispin Hands and his crew. Everyone's been growing. and it seems very healthy. Revrims have got a massive team, and I think they started off with 3 people during COVID lockdown. So it's, we've got entire industries that have formed or substantially grown over time. But nowadays, it's as soon as we started hiring, the amount of people that I was surprised to hear from, you're like, wow, okay. Just because in-house roles don't feel as safe for people anymore as well, which is a shame because like in-house was, I feel like everyone's goal when they first start out as well, because it was seen as a safe role, that a forever role,
Yeah, you could stay for a while. And if you wanted to move, you would have gained a lot of experience in the meantime. But yeah, it just seems very delicate at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. And, you've now got vendors with prestige in the industry, which is amazing. They're seen as like boutique. And if you hire them, things will just be awesome. And that's a really cool thing, like Skywalker Sound. Just as soon as you mention that name, people will be like, yeah, this will sound good. There's an expectation. Hopefully people think that of Warner. But yeah, it's like you get a bit of a reassurance when you hire someone, just as extra hands or support or entirely. So it's been really cool to be able to help people through Warner that have maybe just been misfortunate with their roles in the industry over time.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's been so amazing getting to watch the team that you've been able to build. Like, a lot of people that I've known sort of tangentially just from being in the scene. The one that I was really stoked about was Chris Latham. He is so good. And he was on Concord for such a long time. And that game just sort of explodes, unfortunately. So I was super, super stoked that you were able to get him on your team.
Yeah. He's honestly, he's lovely. I met him through initially the sound design Discord because I was doing a sound design challenge for them. I was hosting it and he hosted the one following me. And that's kind of where I first heard of his name. But then since hiring him, I learned from everyone. He's like a little mini celebrity, but he's really awesome. Everyone that's joined us I'm very proud of. Same for Matt Wesdock. He's someone I worked with very closely through my entire time at Wabi Sabi Sound. And now I get to work with him every day again. And that was one of my favorite parts about the job. So that's just really cool.
That's amazing. I mean, it just makes me really happy. I'm super excited to see what you guys are going to build over at Warner Brothers. But yeah, I think that's about time. So if you have any final remarks or anything you'd like to give to the listeners before we wrap up, now's the time.
No, not really. Just thanks for listening, I guess, to us waffle. I think we probably covered 50% of the topics that we had written down, but that's just how we roll.
That's always how it goes. I always try to have more notes than we need, but we always just kind of end up talking and then the conversation goes where it goes. So yeah. But yeah, right on, man. Thank you so much for taking the time. I really, really appreciate it. It's great to talk to you again. It's been a while. So yeah, thanks again for your time. And we'll see you guys next time.
Yeah, see you around, dude.